It's coming today from Information Age Financial Solutions discussing a fantastic book, Discrimination and Disparities by Thomas Sowell. He's a fantastic economist and a go-to for a lot of different people, especially George, what is his last name? He has his YouTube channel. I can't even get his last name. One guy that I followed directly, he mentioned him a number of times, and I didn't realize I actually utilized him when I was in college for a report that I did. Thomas Sowell is by far one of the best people in laying out empirical data from a global perspective. And this book is one of his best books he's ever done. I'm going to read the back of this from the preface of what he's talking about. It gives you a kind of an idea of what the book is about and why you need to have this in your library, or definitely one that you should read. The goal of discrimination and disparities will be met if it can provide clarification on some major social issues that are too often mirrored in dogmas and obfuscation. Individuals can then decide what policies suit their own values and goals. As Daniel Patrick Moynihan once said, "You're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts." And a lot of times when we're hearing different information, especially from political dogma or people just ranting off different things, they're not really going into empirical data. They kind of go based on opinions, and then the world of worlds then takes over your mindset and allows you not to give really critical thinking to what is being stated. Or they can actually change and utilize certain bits and figures that may seem like, oh, this seems like this is a real issue. And then when you extrapolate it further, you find out it's not really a real issue. It's really that it needs more exploring at the bare minimum. Discrimination and disparities just goes through a number of different things, and it utilizes so many different areas that you wouldn't even put together. I remember one time reading through the book, it talks about why certain places have tornadoes, and they have all other places might have all the different weather issues that make it, but they just don't have it. And that doesn't seem like it means anything, but when you compare it to utilizing and how he uses a reference to go forward and explaining why something may seem like a discriminatory practice, like having why some areas in urban areas charge more for a particular item than maybe Walmart, and he goes and using the data as a detail and uses what would not be normally comparable a tornado issue, and shows how because of the certain different things that comes out. And I'm not doing a good job at even using that as a comparison. I'm going to kind of dive in some more of the books and I earmarked these books. I just dog ears everywhere. Highlighted like I was in college again. And his language, and if you just read it, and it's just fantastic. Diversity. A fragmented society, people polarized a separate group, identifies used to call balkanized society under the painful history of strife, bloodshed, and atrocities in the Balkans. And he just goes into the world of words and how agendas are being put, and by social agendas that really we don't know, that has no empirical data, or just goes by the moment. That renowned historians and economists fail to check those readily available sources is just one side of what can happen in an academic monoculture where the promotion of a social vision takes procedure over the search for facts. Just wanted to point that out. Mellon's own book, Taxation of People's Business, in fact, argued just the opposite, that higher income people should pay more tax revenue to the government, rather than having high tax rates on paper that were merely a gesture of taxing the rich, while allowing them to escape actually paying those high tax rates by investing in tax-exempt securities. I'm just kind of reading different things that I pointed out and may not go together at the time, but there's so many different things that I dogmented here. I put dog, what they call it, the ear dog titles, where you push down a page and television. That's actually the wrong choice of words, but I'm just not even doing justice to how good this book is. What words openly declare can be tested against empirical evidence, but what words insinuate can bypass that safeguard. Even an innocent-sounding phrase like income distribution, endlessly repeated, can suggest a process in which income exists somehow and is then distributed as one might distribute food at a dinner table or gifts at Christmas. In reality, there is only a figurative distribution of income in a statistical sense, in which there is a distribution of heights among people ranging from the heights of little children to the heights of professional basketball players more than 7 feet tall. But no one imagines that heights exist somewhere as independent entities and are then literally distributed in the sense of being handed out to individuals. In a plain, straightforward sense, most income is not distributed at all, either justly or unjustly. Most income is a market economy, is earned directly by providing something that someone else wants and values enough to pay for it, whether what they are paying for is labor, housing, or diamonds. That's just right there. It speaks for itself. Freedom is not some new or esoteric concept. It is a concept widely understood and deeply felt for centuries, especially deeply felt by those who did not have freedom, such as slaves, serfs, prisoners, and people living under totalitarian dictatorships. Many such people have made desperate attempts to escape to freedom, even at the risk of their lives. This was not done to get government benefits. Spartacus was not fighting to get farm subsidies or housing vouchers. Yet many intellectuals living in the safety and comfort of free societies have found it expedient to redefine freedom so that an expansion of government determination of economic outcomes through an expansion of government compulsion is not seen as a trade-off for freedom, but as simply an expansion of freedom as conveniently redefined. Social visions and human consequences. This is in chapter 6. Most people do not have simply a random assortment of opinions or various subjects. More commonly, there's a certain coherence among their views on different issues, suggesting that there's some underlying vision of the world, and that particular opinions on particular issues are more or less corollaries of the premise of that vision. His wording is on a higher level. I do have to put that disclaimer out, but it's worth your time. I mean, it gives such a broad view of so many different things that we've been coming as commonplace, that we never really question because we believe into the social narrative, really not even seeing and being old-fashioned here. Is there any data to prove what you're stating here? Foundations of the prevailing vision. At the heart of prevailing social vision of our times is the seemingly invincible fallacy that group outcomes in human endeavors would tend to be equal, or at least comparable or random, if there were no bias interventions on the one hand, nor genetic deficiencies on the other. The essence of the invincible fallacy was perhaps best expressed by Jean-Jacques Rousseau in the 18th century when he wrote on the equality which nature established among men and the inequality which they have instituted among themselves. But nature, in the form of geographic isolation, doomed whole peoples to lagging for centuries or even millennia behind the program of the rest of the world. Yet Rousseau, like many other late believers, is this seemingly invincible fallacy took it as axiomatic that only human biases create inequalities. Geography, demography, cultural differences, and differences in the quantity and quality of parenting all vanish from the vision in favor of one casual factor for which many have imagined that they have had a solution. I jumbled up many of those words. I was trying to read it quickly, and it's just proving a point about why taking the time to read this book is so paramount. Here's another excerpt. I'm just again reading things at random. Are we to believe that children raised in very such different ways for many years before they reach an employer, a college admissions office, or a crime scene must be the same in orientation, capabilities, and limitations when they eventually reach the sites at which statistical data are later collected? And it's essentially meaning that we're not all the same. We're going to have different backgrounds, different things that happen in our family. Different things are going to just change us And if we're trying to make policies based on this, we should really look at the data of all different things before we make these, just running into one group of making decisions. At least allowing the politicians to run narratives that they're not going to be really affected by. He even goes to the one about the this is, again, it's one might see it as being provocative in terms of using that it's sensation. It's not. He's not trying to bring sensationalism, but just challenges the beliefs that we have. He goes on one to sex discrimination to those who believe in the Invincible Fallacy, but when empirical data showed that young male doctors average 500 or more working hours annually than young female doctors worked, that mattered to those who prefer hard facts to sweeping visions. Where, again, his words, but he had the data to prove it, and the human concepts that go along with this. We must nevertheless concede that both geographic and demographic differences make equal developed capabilities and outcomes based on developed capabilities very unlikely. Even at this late date in history, with the scope of communication reaching farther than it has ever reached before, children born in isolated mountain villages are still unlikely to develop the same range of knowledge, skills, and experiences as children born in major seaports around the world. Perfect example right there. Geography still matters because isolation is general, still matters whether that isolation is geographic or social. Among various social subgroups of whites who have had an average IQ similar to the or lower than average IQs of black Americans, the common factor has been isolation, whether it has been isolation in the hills, the mountains, or Appalachia, in the Hebrides Islands of Scotland. He just uses so many different things over time. Again, the title may get you to believe it's more of a racial book, but it's not. It's actually just looking at the disparities and discrimination we've led to believe in every form of facet, whether it be men or women, color, religion. I mean, he covers every basis of it. Even shows how the differences in families, in terms of people being, everyone knows in their own family. You can have 5 different children from one family. Each one of them can have different outcomes. Born from the same parents. It's just, we don't know. While the difference behind the fierce cries of outrage at pay differentials in business and the passing over in silence of far greater pay differentials in sports and entertainment, one possible explanation is that business owners and managers have roles in which they can be replaced by political decision makers, who in turn can impose their kinds of policies preferred by those who imagine that their own superior wisdom or virtue entitles them to dictate to others. But professional athletes and entertainers have roles that obviously cannot be taken over by politicians or bureaucrats. So there will be no point in trying to discredit highly paid people in sports entertainment or to arouse public outrage against them. In any event, the fundamental question is whether people should be paid according to what they produce or paid simply because of their presence. But productivity is an often ignored factor in much of the income disparity literature. Moreover, the question seldom if ever raised as to how many thousands of years a low-level worker would have to work to produce as much wealth as was produced by Bill Gates. Brings the thing to your question. I dived in this book. I'm really a fan of Thomas Sowell. Wrote about him in college. George Gammon is the person that came to my mind who really brought him to my attention. I didn't even realize I utilized some of his data for a college report. But George Gammon talks about him highly, kept mentioning Thomas Sowell. Decided to go read more into his books. I got another one coming. Should pick this book up. It's definitely worth your time, especially if we get into the political arena coming in November, and just for you to think for yourself and make to your own conclusions. If this video has been any value to you, please subscribe, leave some comments, and for my next video for Information Age Financial Solutions, I'm out.